Joining us to expand on this is Karam Singh, Executive Director at Corruption Watch. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. We've just listened there to Deputy President Paul Mashatile addressing the anti-corruption commemoration, really speaking about how corruption is based on selfishness, and also saying that and calling for vigilance really in how corruption is addressed, especially in the public sector. What is your reaction, just having listened to the Deputy President?
Thanks. Thank you for having me on the program. I think the Deputy President's words are the right kind of messaging that we want to hear. We absolutely need vigilance. We need an all of society approach. So there's got to be a recognition that government alone is not going to change the culture of corruption, that the culture of, in order to turn the tide against the culture of corruption, we all have our role to play, whether it be as leaders in schools, in church groups, in civil society, and the private sector. But we mustn't underemphasize the vital role that government does have to play, and the difficult place that we find ourselves in, even several years after the dark days of state capture, when it comes to effectively pursuing accountability for corruption. So we need to see much more vigilance in terms of how the leadership of the police executes its mandate. And we also need to see appropriate resourcing put into law enforcement, particularly the MPA, who are battling with some of the corruption cases that they've enrolled. And they tell us that they have challenges around capacity and resources. Well, if we're going to be vigilant, we need to make sure that those with a dedicated mandate to fight corruption have the right tools, resources, and laws available at their disposal to pursue their mandate.
Yeah. As you speak about resources, we know that, of course, how central and important whistleblowers are within the bigger scope of ensuring that corruption and corruption elements are brought to the surface and to the public. We know that today the Deputy President signed an anti-corruption pledge as a whistleblower activist. How imperative is that, especially looking at what's happened to whistleblowers, how whistleblowers are treated, how some have had to flee South Africa and really, have to provide protection for themselves after unveiling the corruption that's been taking place? Absolutely.
I mean, the whole principle of enhanced whistleblower protection and support needs to be an imperative of any anti-corruption program and agenda. I mean, this came out so clearly during the Zondo Commission, even in President Ramaphosa's closing remarks, the kind of acknowledgement and recognition that the centrality of whistleblowers have, whether it be through the Gupta leaks or other major revelations. The problem is, as you noted, that the environment is not safe for whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are intimidated, they're threatened, and in some cases their physical safety and their lives are put into threat. So we need a system which incentivizes and protects whistleblowers, that changes the balance of the current system, which is chilling and which is a disincentive. So one of the big things we've advocated for is a system which can incentivize whistleblowers, where the information that whistleblowers provide is successfully rewarded by our system, and that could help rebalance the current state of affairs.
What has been happening is, you make mention of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and we know that, with the first anniversary of the release of those that final report, a lot was said about the slow progress in holding perpetrators accountable, really just speaking about exposing corruption, having whistleblowers risk their lives, and then when the recommendations are made, there seems to be an inaction.
I think the issue around perceived inaction, I think part of the challenge around that is that there hasn't been, the presidency in particular has not been completely out in front of the issue in terms of bringing the public into its confidence about all the different measures that it's taking. So, there are numerous pieces of legislation that are snaking through Parliament. There have been other initiatives to reestablish some of the key institutions, most notably SARS. But, this issue of accountability really becomes kind of the Achilles heel. We have the recommendations. We have a blueprint to take us into a new era. But we have, a system of impunity because those people that were fundamentally responsible for state capture have not been successfly prosecuted. Some people even remain with their jobs. Some of implicated people even residing still in cabinet. So the Zondo Commission was an absolute victory for transparency and for revealing what happened in state capture. But we still have so much to do when it comes to accountability, and central to that will be criminal prosecutions.
What about South Africa's role in implementing the UN Convention Against Corruption? I mean, there's been a lot of question marks around that part.
So next week will be the Conference of State Parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption. It starts on Monday in Atlanta in the U.S. It'll be the 10th Conference of State Parties. We've issued an open letter to the South African delegation calling for them to take bold positions on a range of transparency issues, particularly relating to beneficial ownership transparency and in the public procurement space, because we know that those are big vulnerabilities. So we don't know what's been going on behind the scenes in terms of the negotiations to date, but we really hope during the course of next week that there will be some bold statements coming out of that conference, and that South Africa will be on the right side and leading, some of the discussions to ensure that the global enforcement regime is strengthened, that there's greater global cooperation, and that we have a more robust anti-corruption system, which has to be built on the principles of international cooperation.
SOEs featured quite extensively in the State Capture Commission's report, and as you and I speak, breaking news just in, Eskom has a new group chief executive, Mr. Dan Marokane. What do you make of this appointment?
I did hear that in your announcement. I think it's a developing story. I don't know much about his background, but it sounds like it's potentially a very positive development. We know Eskom has been plagued with leadership challenges, and this has created issues for it in terms of pursuing an anti-corruption agenda. So we wish all the best, and we give our support to the leadership of Eskom to take that SOE to a place where it's more resilient to the type of shenanigans that happened during state capture.
Yeah. With those shenanigans not far at the end of the queue, what sort of leadership will be required of him?
I think it's going to have to be very bold leadership, leadership that doesn't have sacred cows, leadership that is transparent, that doesn't rely upon, the kind of investigative reports that we saw from the previous era. Eskom needs to get to the bottom of the criminal syndicates, which as they've been alleged. So, we want to see progress in that area. I think Eskom will continue to cooperate with law enforcement and with the Special Investigating Unit, amongst others, who have ongoing investigations there. So, again, this goes back to the accountability question. Who was responsible for irregular contracts at Eskom? Who is running the criminal syndicates that have been, bleeding the utility dry? And, can we establish cases against some of those people in order to, pursue successful prosecutions? That a lot remains to be seen there.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in. Karam Singh, Executive Director at Corruption Watch there.